name?
My name is Tom Waring. I'm now 73 years of age and am the County Councillor for Redditch Crabs Cross Division. My wife and I and our family moved to Redditch in January 1956 from South Birmingham. I was first elected to the Redditch Urban District Council in 1972 and then to the Hereford and Worcester County Council in 1973, and I've been a councillor ever since that period for most of the time, either on Redditch Council and its successors, and then I was elected to the Worcestershire County Council in May 1997. I wrote a book in 1994 which I would like to quote from. It concerns obviously wartime memories, and here goes. The declaration of war on the 3rd of September 1939 was no surprise even to we school children. Trial runs had been made in respect of the evacuation of Birmingham children, but comparatively few suburban children were prepared to get involved, wrongly as it turned out, assuming that only the centre of the city would be in danger. I flatly refused to leave Brum, but my sister and some of her friends joined the scheme. In the event, Ruth was unhappy in Burton-on-Trent. We fetched her home after but a short sojourn. One or two schools had completely shut up shop, with the exception of the odd pupil, Moseley Boys Grammar School being evacuated, as were other schools nearer the city centre, so these few pupils joined our classes at Billesley, our school carrying on as near as normal as possible, which it continued to do so despite air raids. Air raid shelters of 9-inch brick walls with reinforced concrete roofs were built in the playgrounds, which were cold and damp. We children were practised in air raid drill, when we paraded like soldiers, being marched off in orderly formations to file into the air raid shelters. One of the teachers, a Mr. Leake, was a TA soldier who loved displaying his parade ground skills and voice. He obtained a commission, and we kids thought him a hero when he visited the school in uniform when on leave during the war. I recall us sheltering during the daylight air raids of 1940-41, when we children sang hymns to keep our spirits up, as well as songs learned in singing lessons, conducted by teachers who were often more frightened than we were. As a prefect, I was able to control the entrance, and well recall looking out of the air raid shelter, watching a dogfight overhead between our fighters and German aeroplanes, until being ordered back under cover. The caretaker, Mr. Albert Smith, military medalist, was a cousin of my now wife's father, who was quite a powerful figure in the school, and also a section leader, sergeant, in the special constabulary, keeping everyone in the school in order. There were times of great sadness when children known to us had been killed the night previous. I remember walking to school past the bombed End Terrace house in Capcroft Road, in which lived a family, one of their triplets being killed, other members of the family injured. Then there was the grief of children who had lost fathers, brothers or near relatives and friends, when school assembly took on a special significance. My father seemed to work every hour that God sent, building air raid shelters, then working on the building of army camps and air force stations. He later worked on bomb-damaged buildings and wartime emergency factory buildings, being in a reserved occupation. But shortage of manpower saw the building trade called up for military service, leaving mainly elderly men, apprentices and the unfit to cope. Craftsmen, labourers and management grades were medically examined up to those of 44 years of age, then drafted into the forces, along with the up-and-coming 18-year-old conscripts. My father was 39 years of age with 4 children when he was called up in 1942. My mother was left to cope with me, aged 15, Ruth 13, Morris 8 and already suffering from bronchitis, while John, who was born on the 16th of May 1940, was but 2 years old. Since his birth by caesarean section, my mother had been operated on for a hysterectomy in 1941, she being then anything but healthy. I also recall her near demise from peritonitis. but others were equally placed, some worse off. The pay of an army private soldier on enlistment was 3 shillings per day. My mother's total allowances, including father's contribution of 7 shillings per week, was about £2 per week. My aunts were extremely generous. There was no question, of course, of my mother going out to work. I now wonder how mother felt when I joined the army on the 15th of August 1944, leaving her even worse off with 2 soldiers in the family. But father never served abroad. After infantry training and a false start as a cook, he came into his own as a maintenance bricklayer in the Royal Army Ordnance Corps at an armoured fighting vehicle depot in Bawtry, Yorkshire. When I got leave, he obtained compassionate leave, which he much enjoyed in his garden and on his 300 square yards allotment on Billesley Common adjoining our garden. He kept chickens, rabbits and supplied the family's vegetables, helping other folk too. My father was discharged from the army on a B release, essential work, soon after the war finished, when he commenced work on the building of prefabs. My school career ended in May 1941, when I was given my school leaving certificate, on which was recorded my school prefect status, a certificate that I still have in my possession. The last job my father wanted for me was in the building trade, although he would not have minded had I gone into the office in a white-collar job, but concerned about my small size and hoping for a large bronzed physique, also reasoning that due to bomb damage builders would always be required, I applied to W.J. Whitall & Son Limited, established 1796, of Lancaster Street, Birmingham, when after interview I was appointed as an apprentice bricklayer. This required attendance at Birmingham Central Technical College on day release studies, my experience of which are recorded in the later articles and press letters contained in my book. The war was an exciting time to we young folk. Soon after commencement, we had delivered to our home an Anderson shelter, named after the pre-war Home Secretary Sir John Anderson. It consisted of curved-ended, corrugated and galvanised iron sheets, which when bolted together formed an arch, to which was butted on straight section to form ends, the one end having a square cutout for means of ingress and egress, when the shelter was erected and partially submerged in the ground. Our shelter was placed at the bottom of the garden at 755 Yardley Wood Road, the joints sealed and then a protective layer of soil piled over the top, a blackout recess and roof placed at the entrance, formed from sandbags bonded like brickwork, these being continued over a wooden head. Eventually 2 bunks were placed on each side, on which we took shelter during air raids. Unfortunately, no account has been taken of the possibilities of prolonged rain, with a rising water table. I recall one morning waking up and stepping into 6 inches of water, which was alarming in every respect. We sheltered then under the stairs until contractors had effected tanking, a concrete floor, then a 4.5-inch brickwork skin inside, including an impervious membrane. Memories abound of the Anderson shelter, not least of the noise of whistling bombs, the noise of anti-aircraft gunfire. We each tried to reassure the other, but it must have been as terrifying for my mother and father as it was for the younger children, my age group, that thoroughly enjoyed it, that is, we boys. One night I recall a whistling through the air and something landed in the hedge between our house and our neighbours, the Tarpleys, at 757. I told my father that it was an unexploded bomb, but he refused to allow me to investigate until daybreak, when I fished out of the hedge the spinal column and end sections of a 5/6 feet long Molotov breadbasket, as they were called. This was a container for incendiary bombs, which we kept as a wartime memento for many years. Another evening we were asleep in bed during a lull in the air raids when suddenly ack-ack guns opened up. A crash sounded above the bed occupied by Morris and me in the rear bedroom, when we all shot out of bed, I wrapping Morris in a blanket and hastened to the shelter with the family. It transpired that right above our heads, lodged in a ceiling joist, was a piece of jagged metal shrapnel from anti-aircraft shell, of a sign about 9 inches size, about 9 inches by 2 inches. This was also kept for years. At 14 years of age, I pestered my parents to death when eventually they allowed me to join the Police Auxiliary Messenger Service. I had to buy a white shirt and black tie, but was issued with a smashing uniform, identical to that now used by the police. Also issued was a civil defence respirator and a steel helmet painted blue, on which was lettered in white, Police, surmounted by an M. On my epaulets was my number, 796, and PAMS. How important I felt, but the job was quite hazardous. After training, I was required to report, when the siren sounded, to Billesley Police Station, also to perform a 4-hour duty each week. My bicycle was my weapon. In the event of the telephone wires being blown down, I had to cycle frantically between police stations in E Division. The police officers during an air raid, regular, war reserve and special constabulary, were ordered to stay in the police stations, only going out to defined incidents, while we little chaps of 14 to 18 years were apparently expendable. But I enjoyed it, especially the cakes and tea in the police canteen. I particularly loved that old Victorian house, still housing Billesley Police Station, opposite Swanshurst Park. The park then housed an anti-aircraft battery. Later it served as a prisoner of war camp, confining Italians and later Germans until well after the war finished. My interest in uniforms also caused me to join the Air Training Corps, when I became a member of No. 2 Flight 489 Squadron ATC, meeting at Dolphin Lane School, Laycox Green. Social events were held at Sparkhill Commercial School, where my sister Ruth eventually studied, its headmaster being a Captain Toy. This First World War officer was also a flight lieutenant, an OC of 489. How sad it is to look at my photograph of annual camp at Wellesbourne Aerodrome, Warwickshire, 1941, when realising the number of those lads who were to lose their lives as aircrew later in the war. My mastoid operation has never helped me on swings, roundabouts, on sea, sometimes even in road travel, certainly not in the air. A 3.5-hour flight on an Avro Anson during that week's camp put paid to any ideas of an RAF career. I was violently ill due to turbulence, thinking my end had come, soon afterwards handing in my uniform on resignation. Big Stan Deakin, my mate at college and fellow Whitall apprentice brickie, had joined underage the Home Guard anti-aircraft unit at Stonehouse, Bartley Green, which was near Stan's Wheelie Castle home. Being military barmy, I joined too, despite the long journey from my home in Billesley. 138th, 101 Warwick's Home Guard, Z, mixed, anti-aircraft battery, Royal Artillery, was exactly what I'd been seeking. Far enough from home not to put deception over age in jeopardy. The training given by the regular gunner NCOs was first class, an excellent grounding for my desired career as a regular soldier. I became in 1942 number 995, gunner wearing CT, and was posted to Dog Troop, 8th Relief, in what was a cracked battery that eventually won the Efficiency Cup of the division, as my album photographs reveal. A Tests of Elementary Training card, I still have this, was issued to me. I attended evening training parade, Sunday parade, qualifying as a gunner in 6 weeks flat. Then I was issued with uniform, battle dress, greatcoat, forage cap and RA cap badge. Later we had to use the Royal Warwickshire Regiment cap badge. Boots, ammo, anklets, web, unlike the infantry home guard, service respirator, steel helmet, shoulder titles including the ACAC command sign, a bow and arrow pointing vertical on a red square background. The kit was proudly borne home. My mother was asked to sew on the badges, etc., when she gave me the ultimatum on the police uniform. So I resigned from the PAMS, handing in my much prized uniform, including peak cap and Birmingham City Police cap badge. All of my energies, apart from expending some on college work, were spent on becoming an efficient part-time soldier. My experiences of night manning are recorded elsewhere. I volunteered for weekend training, infantry weapon training, instructional techniques courses, etc. I ensured that my uniform was always immaculate, webbing blancoed, boots highly polished, brasses gleaming. At 16 years of age, as a qualified instructor second class, I was promoted to Lance Bombardier. Then came my first live firing camp, a weekend at New Brighton, near Liverpool. Just turned 16, I entrained on a troop train with many others at New Street, or was it Snow Hill Station, to Lime Street Station, Liverpool. On stepping onto the whetstone sets when marching from the station, my feet shot from under me, the breath being knocked out of me. Who should help me up but an old neighbour from Artley Grove, Hall Green, soon serving with the Billesley Common Battery, Ernie Clements. But we were soon separated on Bedford trucks to RA camp. The following morning, after a wash and shave in cold water, we made our beds up, then paraded for breakfast. The inspection over, we marched down to the promenade on which were located the twin rocket projectors, Zs, that we were familiar with. One of them was a tangle of twisted metal. On inquiry, a regular senior NCO told us truthfully that a misfire had exploded that previous weekend. We refrained from inquiring about casualties. As an NCO, I was selected to fire first, when I was allocated as number 1 of the 2-man detachment. 8 of us formed up behind the 4 serviceable projectors. The order was given to take posts when we doubled to our projector platforms. I put on my telephone headset, carried out the check drills, including checking my 56-pound rocket on my side that the fuse was at 3.0. A regular sergeant was stood by me, but it was all a bit nerve-wracking. The orders came to fuse the rounds, then number 2 loaded. He knocked out his loading stop, then came the orders to me for direction, his for quadrant elevation, then stand by. When he pressed his button, I put my hand on the firing device, brake. The order fire was given. I closed my eyes, pushing the handle down, completing the electrical circuit, and fired the rounds, when there was an almighty bang and a whoosh. The next I remember was the regular sergeant saying, "Watch them go up, son." He grabbed me by the arm to see the rockets disappearing into the sky and eventually into the sea. The order was then given, detachment rear. We changed round. I became number 2 when I had to load up the rockets, while the other NCO fired. At that stage, the full operational battery located to the rear opened up without warning, this being our baptism of fire. We had no earplugs. It was quite alarming, but how proud and pleased we felt afterwards. Within weeks I was tested in instructional technique and gunnery knowledge, becoming a qualified instructor first class, wearing an armband on the gun park of white with QI on it, being promoted to full bombardier, 2 stripes. On my 17th birthday, official age 19, I was promoted sergeant and made troop sergeant of dog troop. To be honest, I was as regimental as a button stick. How on earth those chaps put up with me, I don't know, especially the old sweats who had First World War experience. But they must have seen some good in me, I suppose. When my calling up papers arrived, I marched into the battery office for the last time, saluted Captain Fletcher Davis, OC 8th Relief, and said to him, "Sir, I am joining the Corps of Royal Engineers as a regular soldier. I would like to thank you for all your help in training me. I have a confession to make. Your records show me as a 19-and-a-half-year-old. I am only 17-and-a-half. He and his officers wish me well. The training and experience gained with 138th was of great value to me. Army Form AF 1158 was issued to me by the Quartermaster of 138th to take with me in my uniform to the Infantry Training Centre, Maryhill Barracks, Glasgow. I bade my mother, sister and 2 brothers goodbye, throwing 4-year-old John up in the air in my arms to hide my emotion, then set off for Birmingham New Street Station in 1944, feeling a bit apprehensive. Trying to be cheerful, I said to a chap from Shirley, who I met on the station, son of Dan Tremelling, the Birmingham City footballer, "Cheer up, mate. We've only got to soldier until 1951. He was a regular to be in the Royal Army Service Corps. No stripes or shoulder titles on my uniform or cap badge. I felt insignificant. The 9:30 p.m. wartime blacked-out train steamed out of New Street Station for Glasgow, not arriving at Glasgow Central until 9:30 a.m. the following morning. Okay. This is a letter that I wrote some years ago, which was published in a Birmingham Post. Memories of a Z battery. Sir, space did not allow John Bright to give more detail in his report, the Birmingham Post, November the 17th, on Z rocket anti-aircraft batteries stationed around Birmingham during the war. The unit at Bartley Green was a regular army unit to which was attached some 1,000 Home Guards. It had a certain glamour appeal, so much so that I deserted the Police Auxiliary Messenger Service at 15 years of age to join 138 Battery as a 15-year-old. We wore the Royal Artillery cap badge, webbing gaiters too. Our battle dress blouse sleeves were resplendent with AA Command's red bow and arrow flash. The training received from the regular gunners was first class. I still remember every detail of the gun drill. It stood me in good stead when I joined the Corps of Royal Engineers as a regular soldier in 1944. Then 17 and a half years of age and Troop Sergeant of Dog Troop 8th Relief 138Z Mixed 101 Warwicks Battery Royal Artillery. I was required to report to Maryhill Barracks, Glasgow in my Home Guard uniform, less stripes, etc. There were a number of us serving underage. What staggers me now is how we were tolerated by the 1914-18 war old sweats. The training was tough. It included firing camps at New Brighton, firing over the sea. Terrifying at first when the full battery station there opened up. Then we had infantry training, some excellent instructors and NCOs courses too. An allowance of 1 shilling and 6pence, 7.5 pence, per night was payable, if I remember correctly, or there was an evening meal with breakfast at 6 a.m. the following morning, served by ATS girls in lieu. Our battery's function was to provide a box barrage over the Austin Works at Longbridge and Cofton Hackett. It was common to hear the alarm bell sound a number of times during the night, to have to rush out and find one's projector gun in pitch black darkness. There were some odd scares, such as the night when a drifting barrage balloon appeared over the gun site. We all thought it was a parachute mine and prayed hard. Despite all of it, we each put in a 6-day week, working long hours. Those of us that were apprentices attended day release classes, did our homework too and passed examinations. There must be a model somewhere. C.T. Waring, Reddish, Worcestershire. And then another letter that I also had published, entitled The Good Old Days. Come back with me to the wilds of Dumfriesshire during the winters of wartime, when a group of 17, 18-year-old lads who had hitherto led blameless lives due to the Judeo-Christian strong-arm discipline that society preached and practiced in those days, were subjected to continual moral, mental and physical challenges under the principles of systematic training. Housed in Nissen hut accommodation that was unaffected by considerations of thermal insulation, the sole heating appliance was a solid fuel stove, the daily ration of coke being totally inadequate to heat the billet, let alone dry the heavy woolen clothing of the young sapper trainees. Rough wooden two-tier bunks were provided for weary bodies, happy to sleep on straw-filled palliasses and pillows, 5 blankets plus greatcoat on the bed for warmth, no sheets or for that matter pyjamas to wear, clean clothing once per week after the weekly shower in primitive ablutions. Each morning required a wash and shave, normally in cold water, before dressing into battle order that was not removed until the end of the day, due to familiarization training. Battle order included a full pack, pouches, ammunition, rifle and steel helmet. After inspection we marched off to plain yet substantial meals. A passion for cleanliness and good order meant little time in which to become bored or depressed, as training or cleaning filled every spare minute. Competition was fierce, the teamwork superb, inculcated by natural experienced leaders of men. The adventure training was first class, if not a little dangerous, but the end result of trained sappers, I suspect, has stood these young men of yesteryear value ever since. Are we as a society not failing in our duty in not allowing the savages that roam our streets, vandalise and terrorise the weak and vulnerable, a similar experience, only allowing them back into society when civilised? Discipline means the control of each for the benefit of all. Oh, by the way, we were all volunteer regular soldiers. CT Waring, Reddish Advertiser, 1994.